Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Indian Sun, and my name is Sonia Singha. Australia has the highest ratio of international students per capita in the world by a large margin. International students and their contributions play a major role in the country's economy. In a report dating back to 2019, it was reported that about 30% of student body is made up of international students. The Indian students have the second highest population in this cohort. Following that, a large number of graduates remain to contribute in the economy through their skills and experience. But since the pandemic, things have been a little murky for these students who have left home for a brighter future. And to top it up, the current situation back home has probably taken a huge toll on a lot of our international students financially and emotionally. Today, we have Naren and Tushar, two international students who are here to shed light into what's exactly happening with our international students right now. Thank you for being on the show today, guys. I will briefly get you guys to introduce yourself, and then we can throw the floor open to questions.
Sure. Thank you for having us, Sonia. I can go first with the introduction. My name is Naren Shetty. I'm a master's student at Deakin University. In terms of my role as in the student representation sphere, I'm the current president of the Indian Students Association of Victoria, and I also hold various student representation roles at the student union in my university.
Beauty. Tushar, how about you?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me here, Sonia. It's lovely to be here. My name is Tushar Kant, and I am an Indian student. I'm studying my Master's of Medical Engineering at Monash University, and I'm in my third semester here. As far as my representations go, I'm a part of the Monash Multicultural Indian Club.
Mm-hmm.
Also a part of Monash Students Association.
Mm-hmm.
And I represent the activities subsection of the ISA of Victoria.
Beauty. Thank you so much for that, guys. So, just to start off with, I know there is a lot of uncertainty around students being stranded outside. Obviously, some of the students were offered a place in a lot of our recognized uni at the start or during the pandemic. And they've commenced study online, as far as I know. And the same goes with a lot of students onshore as well. Online studies have been delivered primarily. So there is a partial return from what I can tell, but online studies seem to be like the primary mode regardless. Despite this, few of the unis have retained the fee hike that happens every year. The tuition fee remains the same. So maybe could you share us your experience in terms of what you have heard from your peers or what you've personally gone through, and how have the students been managing the financial burden altogether?
Definitely.
You want to go ahead?
Yeah. Sure.
Go for it.
So starting off, being an international student, it was disheartening almost that at the start of the pandemic, we were almost told that you need to return back home if you are not able to support yourselves. Mm-hmm. And this was coming from like the federal government and the Prime Minister himself. So it was really disheartening in that way. And moving forward from that, not being included in any of the support packages such as JobKeeper and Job Seeker, when international students as well are part of the community, do part-time jobs and all of those kind of things. So it was almost disheartening not to be offered that assistance or support at that like really uncertain times general students were facing. But where other like rent relief was a big help for many students, as personally as well, like it made a big difference. But because students lost like big percentage of students lost jobs during the pandemic, and also couldn't rely on support services from the government. They had to return. The ones that did remain here had to like go through a lot of mental health issues and also like social isolation almost, if you're spending a lot of time just stuck at home and not having that social aspect of your university life and all of those kind of things. I'm sure had a really big toll on students.
100%.
Right. To add on to that, I came here as a student in 2020. I remember the exact dates because I landed here on 22nd of Feb. The 3rd of March was my first day at uni. Mm-hmm. And in the afternoon around 2:00, my uni sent me an email newsletter saying that the pandemic has heightened up and we need to go into a lockdown. So After that, my first day in uni was in 2021, which means exactly one whole year was lost to Zoom calls and education on a laptop. Considering the fact that we could have done all of this while still being back home in India, right? We could have saved up on a lot of expenses, which
100%.
which amount to our living expenses, right? Every month we usually spend roughly around $1,000 to 1,300, and all of that money could be saved because that is a huge sum where we come from. Not to mention, it was difficult because as a fresh new student here who has not been around, not seen any of the places, you see, there's an enthusiasm with all the students that come to a new country to study, right? Socializing and making friends is, yes, a big part of it, but you also want to go around places that you've never seen before. And that was something that I felt kind of robbed of, but it was necessary, so I complied. But yes, it, as Naren pointed out, it was a huge toll on the mental health.
Mm.
The stress was insane, simply because when you want to go study abroad, you want the experience of studying abroad, right? If I'm still studying on my laptop, that doesn't really make a difference. It's just like any other. It's like studying any other course on overseas education through
So
overseas
that,
education.
Tushar, did you get that option to actually I think it's called deferring your studies or like taking a break out, or rather postponing your commencement of your study? Did you guys have that option, or was it not made available to you at all?
Well, you can defer your semesters, but there's a limitation to how long you can defer it.
Yeah, right.
Besides, once you defer your studies, you are also creating a gap between your educations, right? So I finished my undergrad. I was working in India in my core domain for about 2 years. And after that, I gave my resignation because I got my COE from Monash University. So I came here. Imagine a situation in which I have to go back home. I'd be unemployed, obviously. I'd be studying, yes. But if I defer, I wouldn't even be doing that. So that's, and if once you defer, it's a 6-month gap. You defer twice, that's a year-long gap.
Yeah.
Now imagine that one whole year is completely wasted with nothing to show for.
Yeah. Kind of 100%. And in terms of the employment, as you mentioned, so I believe there is a 20-hour or rather 40-hour restriction every fortnight that we have, which was consistent throughout the COVID situation as well. Apart from few sectors, I believe it was health, allied health, and now there is tourism and hospitality added to it. So how did that play in terms of, the COVID situation, the market, and you not being able to provide your entire hours to commit to a job, and amidst all of this chaos, how did you guys manage?
Definitely, like not being included in the support packages and still not being able to work more than 20 hours and being able to support yourself is a big challenge. And also considering the things that like our home countries were going through, like especially India, was like our families were dealing with a lot as well. And for them to come up with those funds to cover your and all of those kind of things was getting much harder as well. So the 20-hour restriction it should have been made, like at least during the pandemic, there should have been more lenience towards that. There were several sectors that were barred from that restriction, like healthcare and even retail for that matter, where people in those sectors were allowed to work more than 20 hours. But also like there were a lot of people who weren't but as you know, like majority of international students work in hospitality and like those kind of industries. Only, I think last week it was made extended. Those working hours were extended for hospitality and tourism, as there is like a lack of staff currently, from what I've heard, at least in terms of like just speaking to people, there is a serious lack of like staff in terms of hospitality, because a lot of students who used to work have returned because they don't have any jobs currently. So there is a serious lack of like jobs and people to actually help in the tourism and hospitality sector. So I get that. That's fair. And it's great for students who are in that sector who can now work more hours. But it's also during that time in the pandemic that it led to more exploitation of students as well, because they couldn't do more than 20 hours a week. They were taking up jobs which was paying them cash in hand. So they were open to that exploitation. They didn't really have rights of working because there was no contractual agreement between their employer and themselves. And they were basically open to exploitation. The only way they could work more hours was having a cash job. And I think that in a way diminished like their prospects, like for sure. It made it much harder for them because they were open to all of this exploitation.
Yeah, 100%. And Tushar, how did that play in when you initially arrived in 2020? So with the working hour and the restrictions and all of that, how was like the scenario like for you?
Well, when I came in 2020, I was completely, my support system was my family, and I completely relied on them. But when the lockdown was implemented, it was really difficult to find jobs, simply because people didn't want to fire their own employees, right? And they wanted to retain them, which means there are no new positions opening up.
Yeah.
And result, it became extremely difficult. A fresh student, a new student completely out of their element, completely out of their comfort zone in a completely new environment, new country. It was very difficult. And had I not had friends here who were already in Australia, Melbourne, from a year before, I don't think I would have survived. They helped me out. They were my only social interaction here. And that's the only reason I got through the lockdown. No jobs. It's not like there were no jobs. There were jobs, but there is a preferential criteria. Right?
Yeah.
You always want people with a certain amount of experience. You want certain perks with those people. So a lot of job applications that I came across required people with a Victorian driving license, which I don't have. Most of them came with the with the selection of candidates criteria to be, having a PR or be an Australian citizen. That is also a big no-no, right? Like Naren said, the most jobs that are available to students, they are all casual and vacation jobs.
Yeah.
Now we see the trend that a lot of casual jobs are opening because there are no new students coming in.
Yeah.
Right.
And even with the restrictions, I reckon it's just not the student cohort, it's the recent graduates that have suffered majorly. Like there is a higher competition because there is a lack of, the jobs scenario. There's a lack of jobs. There's higher competition. And as you mentioned, Tushar, with the visa situation, a lot of them prefer having a permanent residency or full working rights or a citizenship. So I understand you both are studying at this stage, but have you had any interaction with your seniors or any recent graduates who have shared their experience as to what they are facing at this stage?
I am almost at the end of my degree, actually. I just have one more semester. So I've started like peeking into that direction, looking at possible graduate roles that I could apply for. And I would say really try out there. Like I am doing a management degree. So it would be more so for me compared to like STEM courses such as like science, technology, and like the things that are on the skill list might be a little better. But the general perception from students that I have been speaking to is been that there's less number of graduate roles for sure. And at least less number of full-time graduate roles. There are part-time graduate roles, but a lot of companies now are scared to hire people full-time because of the long-term prospects of things. So yeah, that's the general perception. There's definitely lack of jobs moving forward. It's great that we are getting this international education that we come here for. We pay so much for, expecting to have a future that is like supports that as well. And like we are eligible for jobs that, like in our graduate roles as well, but that's clearly not happening. And also with the whole PR system being made like really complicated, and even like the point system keeps increasing. The future prospect for students is very bleak at the moment, I would say.
Yeah, 100%.
To add on to that, I would say that I would like to share a story about a friend of a friend, because this is someone I didn't personally know. So what happened was they finished their degree, right? And they wanted to visit back home because in the past 2 years they hadn't. And this was just before the lockdown. Then the lockdown was implemented, and then there was a sudden inflow ban over international flights and people coming back, returning back. And this is just before just after when the person had lost their temporary residence, right? But they are still stuck in India, and they have about 4 months or 6 months left to come back to Australia and start working in the Australian domain, because this becomes a very exciting opportunity for most students that come here, that you get 2 years of temporary residence so that you can at least get a flavor, get a taste of how the Australian system works, right? But that is something that has been taken away from most students.
Yeah.
And then there's this question of students who had applied to different universities, various universities here in Australia, but are stuck in India simply because there is an inflow ban. They cannot come to this country. So I personally, I know someone. We were fast friends back in my undergrad. Wonderful guy, studied computer science, worked in India for about 2 years, applied to Monash here, but then he just couldn't see the prospect of studying online, sitting in India. So he couldn't come back. So he couldn't come to Australia.
Yeah.
And he quit his job for the course. But now he's not studying or working, and the job scenario in India is just as dire.
Yeah. And to be quite honest, like this is what I've heard from students and recent graduates as well. So because of the COVID coming into scenario and people who have like recently graduated, because of the lack of jobs and not being able to do something in the career, people have taken up alternate careers, like something just for the time being, temporarily. And a lot of them are stuck. And the fact that their lives are not moving on career-wise, professionally, that has impacted them to a certain extent as well, emotionally. Could you walk us through in terms of like the emotional support that you could have potentially received from your respective universities, any respective support groups, or have you even has that been even introduced to a certain extent in this international student cohort?
I guess there's been more of an effort from universities. I can speak for my university. Deakin has made more of an effort in terms of offering like emotional and mental health support as well to students who are currently here, because they have acknowledged the fact that students here are in between crossroads, between like they have a lot of things going on back home that it's in the back of their mind. They're also determined to like stay here and finish their degrees and make the most out of all of the things they've invested in their lives here. So yeah, they're in a bit of crossroads with regards to that. But for sure, the universities, I would say at least, have been trying to make more of an effort, like at least for Deakin, there in the last month, there has been like extension of extensions for assignments and special considerations and those kind of things for students without actually having to give like supporting documentation. There's also been like Deakin's having like webinars and all of those kind of things, informing students of what support there is available and what they can access. And they are looking at having like more in-campus events now, more in-person events to like help students through that grief and like help possibly support them better as well. So yeah, I would say there is a bit of more of an effort. It's still not enough. There are a lot of students who aren't very comfortable sharing their stories, who aren't very comfortable coming out. Especially, I feel like it is sort of a taboo topic, especially around mental health when it comes to Indian students. They aren't very comfortable coming forward with that. So yeah, that's a bit of a concern.
Did you have something similar to this, Tushar?
So when I came here, my grandfather was hospitalized, my mom's dad, and he passed away when after about 3 months after I was here. Social isolation, having no new friends, not going out, played a huge role on me developing stress. And I knew if I did not talk to someone, I would lose myself. Right. So I reached out to my university, which is Monash, and they were instrumental in helping me out because they were absolutely wonderful. It was the time during exams, right after week 12 of this first semester. I had just finished up a bunch of assignments, which is a huge workload, which I was not familiar with back in India. Right? We did a bunch of assignments there too, but the intensity here, since we are in a master's program, the intensity here is on a different, completely level. And losing a loved one was like losing a part of yourself, and it was absolutely terrible. But my university was kind enough to provide mental health support by letting me have a free counseling session, and I was free to have more counseling sessions if I needed. Not to mention the aspect that I was not able to find work. The university was also instrumental in helping me there again. So I was in a rented apartment, a shared apartment. My landlord was kind enough to let me off without rent for the next 3 months, which was wonderful of him. He was such a delightful man. And thanks to him, a few months were easier for me. Then university started supplying grants to students. Even now, as the situation worsens in India, Monash University still has a $500 grant for emergencies. If a student here is facing any hardships, it's called the Monash Hardship Grant. And if the student is facing any hardships, they could apply for it. There are no real documents required. You just have to, ask for what you need and why you need it. That's it.
There's just like a lot of the university approach has been on a case-by-case basis. Like it's different for students. Like no two students have the same issues. There's different set of issues each student is facing. I think the university approach has been more in terms of like analyzing them case by case. Like for Deacon at least, there's been avid support given to international students, but there obviously could be more. There could be more issues to be looked at for sure.
The thing with most Indian students is that we don't come forward with our problems. And if you don't come forward with your problems, nobody gets to know about them. If nobody knows about them, they cannot help you.
Why do you think that is? Is there a stigma around, keeping your problems ahead of someone else and seeking help?
Well, mental health itself, the term mental health is rather stigmatized back in India. When you speak about mental health, people might consider, and a large population might consider you as maybe disabled, disturbed. And when you combine that with the mental aspect of disability or disturbance, it's not viewed in a good light. So that stigma has been carried over, and it has come through the students here in Australia too. That's why they have a hard time coming forward. But a lot of students are also, I wouldn't say misinformed, underinformed maybe, because they don't know about the facilities that they can actually they actually have an access to. had they known about the mental health counseling sessions that different, not just university, different organizations provide, maybe they would be in a better mental situation. You know, there are other NGOs. Indian Care is one, a wonderful NGO. So I think this was back in my second semester, somewhere around November. Difficult time, no jobs, and it was hard enough to ask money from your parents, and it just became, life was just difficult. You were scrambling for money for food. So Indian Care, this NGO came up with free vouchers from Coles, Woolworths, all of these places, general stores, and they would you just give them away. Should you tell if you tell them about your hardship, what you need, why you need it, no questions asked.
Yeah. So it seems to me that the support flowing in from your education providers, respective education providers, or rather community groups, charities, that has been, to what it seems to me, that has been pretty ample. Do you have you identified any area where there has been a lack of support, which could have had the scope, or rather could have increased their support in a way that this would have been a smoother ride for international students altogether?
Obviously, the wider thing of one thing is providing these supports, but also to look at how many students are actually using it, to reach out to students in terms of making sure that students know that there is support available. I think that there needs to be more work done in terms of that, and normalizing such things, like normalizing reaching out to get mental health support, get other kinds of support, because I feel a lot of students, international students at least, they look at financial assistance. If there is no financial assistance, they don't feel like they are being supported enough. But that's only the start of it. There's only so much that the universities can do as well in terms of financial support. But I would say more in terms of putting it out there that this is what is available and this is how you can access it. That communication, I think, needs to be better. But also in terms of workplace exploitation, that is one area that everyone needs to look at more deeply, because there are a lot of students working for $8 an hour, $10 an hour, and not even have any work rights. They don't really know when their next payday is. So there's a lot of issues there, and put that together with the strain they're going through, I think it's just a recipe for disaster.
I agree. I completely agree with you, because when we talk about students that have come here, they come in with a mindset of not, asking money from their parents, no financial assistance from their parents. But 9 months, 11 months of straight lockdown has pretty much deprived them of that notion. They want to be independent. Most of us want to be independent, but we can't, because being independent has become a privilege. And when we talk about students looking for employment and being exploited, this is the sole reason why they are being exploited. They want to pay for their own butter, but they can't do it. Secondly, I'd say when students, with all these assistance, with all the assistance that universities and all these NGOs have provided, what it has done is alleviate the pain by a little. It has not cured the disease. We are just treating the symptoms. We are not curing the disease itself, which is lack of employment, a lack of employment opportunities. There are so many hurdles when it comes to employment, and it's just impossible for most students that come here, international students that come here, because employment is completely based on networking, which is a good thing. Networking is important, I understand. But with social isolation and 11 months of lockdown, how do you network? How do you increase your network? When you are not even able to personally talk to someone whom you study with, whom you're supposed to study with for the next 2 years, how do you form a network? How do you form a bond? How do you form an attachment?
That's 100% right. And I kind of resonate to that as well, because on personally, I think I myself have experienced that to a certain level. But since you guys are like representing student bodies in your respective universities, what do you reckon can, escalate this situation a little further and act as a catalyst so that coming ahead, international students have a better prospect in terms of, mental health, in terms of having good jobs, and just in terms of having a good network altogether? What are your thoughts on that?
I feel in terms of like with university mostly being online in the last year, and now obviously we're in this hybrid model where there is some on-campus classes and there's half that still go on online. Students are missing on that interaction with peers, with their lecturers, and all of those kind of things. The social aspect as well is missing out of like university life. You want to experience the whole thing as an international student. You want to have that whole journey. You want to expand your horizons that way. Like you are here to like be better versions of yourself. I feel like the universities and education providers should focus on giving that experience to students, because they're still charging the same tuition fees that we used to was charged students a year ago, but then they were getting all of those things. The students now are getting bits and pieces of it. So they're not like, when they go out in terms of like looking for employment and stuff, there is all these holes in their like experiences, which I feel play a role in them not being eligible for a job. I can't speak for everyone, but it still like does play a role. So I guess like instilling that more in the coming months, and also like just supporting students through tough times, like with all the things going back home, like being more lenient in terms of their academics and like offering more support, I think, and being welcoming. I think that's important as well.
Beauty. Tushar, what have you got to add again?
The thing is, we as Indian students we have a tendency. We tend to communicate better if we are in groups. We have the tendency of forming communities by ourselves. And with the enforcement of lockdown, it becomes extremely difficult, right? You associate with people, you tend to talk to each other so that you are able to form a deeper connection. But once something like that is taken away from you, the ability of that is taken away from you, there is hardly anything you can do to, consider this. I'm a new student in university, and I know I will be looking for a job sooner or later. How do I get a good reference? Wouldn't I want that from someone who would actually be a good reference? Now, who's my best choice for a good reference? Let's see, my professor. Okay, I've met that professor for 3 hours a week over a laptop. How do I form a deeper connection there? How does that professor get to know if I'm good enough to refer to other people, to someone else? There's no trust, there's no bond, and there's no way I'd get a good reference out of a Zoom call. Now, there's that. Plus, how about we talk about opportunities that are provided to the international students? Going back to the hurdles that come up every time that we look at when we are going for employment opportunities, they have a selection criteria. How about having less of those criteria? Why not bring about opportunities through the universities itself? Back in India, we had a trend of placements, university placements. Why not bring that here? And if it cannot be done directly by the university, just give us the directive. Why not form an association that helps with placements for all the international students?
Yeah. Seems to me that there's like a lot of potential that can be explored, but a lot of them have not been voiced to the right sector, to the right government, to the right people for them to actually be put in place. Well, thank you so much, guys. I think that's the end of my long list of questions that I had for you. And It's been an amazing, it's been a very insightful conversation with you guys to for you to shed light on so many different aspects of international student life. And I reckon our audience might not be completely aware what the student body is going through in Australia right now, given the current situation. So thank you so much. Have you guys got any last thoughts to add on to it? Tushar, I'll let you go first this time.
Last thoughts. Well, it's a struggle. It's a hard time, but there are better days to come, because there have been better days that went across in the past. Let's get together. Let's hold on, and be strong for the future.
Amazing. Naren, what have you got to add on to that?
I would like to echo that as well. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. Let's continue to do the things that we're doing, and hopefully in terms of like the border restrictions and all of that, there is more clarity and less uncertainty around the future of international students. And that's what we will be working towards as well. And hopefully in the coming year, there's better opportunities and better welfare support as well. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you again for being on the show. And I resonate with you guys. I hope, there's more brighter aspects for our international student community in Australia here. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having us.